The Doctor. In the TARDIS. Next stop, everywhere.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, back in the TARDIS once again, ready to talk some classic Doctor Who, this time with, once again, returning special guest companion, John Takacs. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere.
Thank you very much, Charles. And it's not a Tom Baker episode this time.
Not a Tom Baker. So, yeah, we're changing it up a little bit. And
I know a little bit more than just season 13.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of figured. I mean, you seem like a pretty well-rounded Whovian, so that's good. So, yeah, we're going to talk today here at episode 147. We're going to talk The Mind of Evil. Or,
this is a favorite. Or
if you're a Dr. Evil fan, Evil.
You go, get the pinky up.
Yes, with the pinky. You got to have the pinky extension. So yeah, this was, of course, the 1971 story from the Jon Pertwee era, written by Don Houghton, who also wrote one of my favorite episodes from the Pertwee era, Inferno, which we talked about not too long ago. And this was directed by Timothy Combe. And this was the second serial of season 8. Like I said, aired in 1971. Of course, starring Pertwee as the Third Doctor and Katy Manning as Josephine Jo Grant. And obviously, pretty much the definitive, I'd say the definitive Third Doctor and companion pairing, considering they were for the most of. I mean, obviously Sarah Jane's important, but I think a lot of people identify her more with the Fourth Doctor than they do the Third. Or am I wrong in that?
No, well, you got to figure with. Liz had a few episodes to start off with.
Yeah, she just had the one series, so yeah.
Sarah Jane was towards the end, and then Katy Manning had that nice long stretch right in the middle.
Exactly. So she had the bulk. I think it was. So yeah, she had the nice bulk of the Pertwee episodes, and this is a great example of how great the Third Doctor and Jo are together. I think they work really well together in this one. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to talking about this one with you, John.
They also work well separately too.
Yes, they do. They do because
we'll get into that.
yeah. Obviously, hey, Katy Manning. Obviously, we know the Third Doctor's paired with other doctors and other companions and whatnot. But Katy Manning, she was, she's done things like, the Sarah Jane Adventures, where she was in The Death of the Doctor, which I thought was a pretty great story, and that's one we're going to talk about here at the end of the month, but you have to wait for that. Mm-hmm. But we'll be talking the much older Jo Grant in that one with Jesse when he gets back. But so I'm kind of curious, John, why did you pick this one, or what as one of your suggested episodes to talk about?
This is just a personal favorite of mine. Jon Pertwee is probably my second favorite Doctor out of the classic Doctors. Mm-hmm. And it's just like I don't know if you want to call it a guilty pleasure, but whenever I'm just feeling like watching a Pertwee episode or a Pertwee story, I tend to go back to his earlier seasons, and this is one that I always kind of navigate to.
Okay, so this is kind of like your go-to Pertwee, or at least one of them?
One of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I really like this one. I grew up watching this episode, in black and white. And because that's all we had for a good while until it was released on DVD in color, colorized because of spiffy technological improvements and whatnot. So it's still, even though I've watched this before on DVD, it still kind of throws me a little bit to kind of see this one in color.
It does, because I saw it the same way you did on Channel 25 in black and white, because seeing that the BBC wiped the original color copy of it,
right,
and that's all they had was the black and white copies to distribute. And then I've got some more notes about that for later on, but just to see it was released in black and white on VHS.
Yeah.
And then eventually with DVD, color.
If you got some notes, why don't you just go ahead and go into that? Because one of the things I love about John, everybody, is that John comes prepared. He comes prepared for class. He does his homework and does his research and always finds out neat little things that, far above and beyond what is called for here in Next Stop Everywhere, because hey, you're used to dealing with me, so like how low that bar is. So John keeps raising the bar, and I think that's awesome. So
I don't want the other guest hosts to think I'm an apple polisher. This is just this and Doctor Who's been
I love that. I think that's great. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the colorization or at least when it was aired in black and white.
Well, yeah, after the VHS release, which I believe was in 1983, before the internet, they just had the spot-on colorization techniques that you used on like Turner movies, which weren't that good. I mean, they were decent for that day and age, but once the internet came around and they started using more technology, they found out that there is actually color segments in black and white film. So they were able to, with the restoration team, they brought that back. The only one that they couldn't do was episode 1. And that's where I want to call him an internet phenomenon for Doctor Who, Stuart Humphreys, also known as Babel Color.
Right, yes.
He painstakingly did episode 1 on his own. And that's what you see on the DVD release that we have now.
And thank God for fans like that, because obviously fans were kind of responsible for preserving a lot of the audio recordings.
Oh, yeah.
From the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton stories that were lost because, of course, the BBC junking them and from their archives. But the audio lives on, and which is why you get to see a lot of stories these days being restored through animation, because the fans like that save the audio. So that's, it's amazing, when you have dedicated fans like that and doing it not just, for their benefit. I'm sure they're doing it, also just for the benefit of all Doctor Who fans. And I'm sure, and it's people like that really should be, honored and recognized, I think, for their efforts.
And even before VHS and all that, I was one of those kids that had the tape recorder up to the speaker. Yeah. And anytime somebody walked in the room, I was just like, "Shh, I'm recording," just so I could listen to it later on.
Yeah. No, I get that because I was kind of doing that stuff too. Like with and cassette, this is obviously showing my age, but like when you're doing it on audio cassette, you had an audio cassette recorder, and I kind of put it up to like my bedroom TV, and would like record like Monty Python the Holy Grail, so I could listen to it in the car.
Right, guilty.
And memorize all the lines because what Monty Python fan is, you got to be you're not worth your weight unless you can pretty much quote Monty Python and the Holy Grail from start to finish. So I totally get that. And I remember like those early efforts at recolorization that you're talking about, like with Turner and whatnot, that, obviously like some of the pigmentation was off and it looked kind of fuzzy and grainy, and just, it was better than black and white, but not much.
Not much, right, exactly. I think they did the best they could with what they had.
Exactly. So obviously, technology improved, and this story, obviously it was re-released on, or even though it was on VHS before, I think it was released on DVD, and which where a lot of us got to see it in color for the first time, and we were just like so thrilled with that. And I think that was what 1998, if I'm not mistaken.
2003 was the DVD release.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind.
But yeah, I think the VHS copy was 83.
Okay.
And that was a double pack, and you got a chance to see the first 5 minutes of episode 1 in color at the end of the second tape.
Yeah, because this story is 6 episodes. So, they had to pull out the old double cassette
Right.
So you had that much larger box, which took even up more space on your shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then comes along that nice DVD version that you can replace it with, and hey, look, it's like half the size of one VHS tape.
Right.
So
I still have my tapes though.
I do too,
Yeah.
but I have them in like archive boxes because I know I know I won't be going back to them, but I don't want to get rid of them.
No,
So-
I don't want. Yeah, I'm afraid that if I put it in the player, because I still
Yes.
have a player,
Right.
it's going to eat it up. So it's,
Exactly, because they're so old and you don't know how old is the player, like did that kind of break down, and you're worried you don't want to get chewed up because
right, exactly.
that's one of the horrible things about VHS tapes, as any VHS tape owner knows, is that horrible crunching sound when a tape gets eaten by the VCR.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just no.
Oh yeah.
And then you
been
try
there.
to try to best to kind of rewind it with a pencil, like sticking the pencil at the end in the cassette to kind of wind it back, and then you hope to kind of smooth it out. And then when you play it back, some of the video has been kind of distorted.
Yep, you get the lines everywhere.
And you're just like, ugh. Why isn't there something better? And then something better came along. DVDs, yes, and there was much rejoicing. Hooray! See, I brought it back to Monty Python.
Hooray.
All right,
There you go.
see how that worked. All right, so so while we're on the subject of trivia, any other trivia you want to share with the class?
Well, who was it? The director here, Timothy Combe.
Timothy Combe. Oh yeah, he's got an interesting story. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was his final Doctor Who story because he went so over budget, and so they just spent way too much time filming this one, and the straw in the hat was the helicopter at the end of the story.
In the 6th episode, yeah.
Yeah, Barry Letts said, "You know what? You're done."
Yeah,
And it's too bad because he did this Doctor Who and the Silurians. He also worked on, and he wasn't director on it, but he was also on Keys of Marinus as an assistant floor manager. Production assistant on the Reign of Terror, so he wasn't a rookie. He had his street cred with that.
Right, but apparently, just the idea that he used that helicopter and surprise, helicopters cost money, and especially with Doctor Who, which is obviously always looking to save a buck or two. That obviously was one of the reasons why this production went over budget, and Barry Letts, basically banned him from being even considered for any future Doctor Who work.
Exactly.
So we kind of lost a director, but I can kind of see where Barry Letts is coming from because hey, if Doctor Who continues to run over budget, then Doctor Who doesn't get renewed because the BBC suits don't like that.
Nope.
And so but it's kind of interesting about that story. Now, I have a little bit of trivia because there is this one scene where I'm not sure it's really trivia. It's just more like Easter eggs, I think. When the scene when the Doctor is attacked by the Keller machine and he kind of sees a lot of various rogues, I want to say his rogues gallery, but a lot of the monsters and whatnot that he'd faced up to that point. Obviously, there are a lot of easily recognizable ones like Daleks and Cybermen and whatnot. But for a lot of Doctor Who fans that, especially modern fans that may go back and watch this story, they may not recognize some of the monsters right off the bat. So I thought I'd run those down really quickly. So obviously, he sees a Cyberman during this scene. He sees the War Machine, and that was like one of the last William Hartnell stories, The War Machine. He sees that. He sees a Zarbi from the Web Planet.
Right.
He sees a Sensorite from, of course, the Sensorites. He sees Coquillion, and this is a really obscure one, from The Rescue, which is also a William Hartnell era story. So that was a kind of an interesting one to bring back. Obviously, a lot of modern fans will recognize the Ice Warrior, Slar, and a Silurian, and then, of course, he hears a Dalek. So, but I thought it was kind of... like for those who, like I said, may not be familiar with some of those classic era, especially from the Hartnell era, I thought I'd kind of run those down about where you can kind of like check out where they came from.
And the fact that they used one of them from a 2-episode serial, that's just... I'm really surprised they put Coquillion in there.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that's unless you're probably like really into Doctor Who, you probably wouldn't recognize that one. I mean,
and they go by so fast too.
Exactly.
It's hard to figure them out.
Yeah, and then like I had to pause that one. I'm like, okay, where's that guy? Oh, yeah, that guy.
And they're like, why did they put him in there?
Exactly. Just because he looked cool? I don't know, but
thankfully they didn't put a space pirate in there. But
yeah, exactly. Or I'm surprised they didn't put a Croton in there. But also, when one of the visions that the kind of the Third Doctor experiences, at the hands of the Keller machine. After the event, he tells Joe, he's talking about, he makes this one comment. He goes, "Not long ago, I saw an entire world consumed by fire."
Mm-hmm. That's in my notes.
And that's a reference to another Don Houghton story, Inferno, that I was talking about. So it was kind of a nice sly move by Don Houghton to kind of reference his previous story. Mm-hmm. Because obviously Joe doesn't realize this because she wasn't around at the time.
Right.
But we were, as fans watching this.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a very sly reference on Don Houghton's part.
Yeah, like it just kind of put a little like, okay, hey, I did this one too, so I'm going to make reference to it.
Exactly. So you got any other trivia while we're on the subject?
The fact that the actress that played Shin Lee is actually married to Don Houghton.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she came back in one of the Big Finish audios, and their daughter played a role.
Pixen Lim.
Yep. Yeah. Their daughter played who's it? Sarah Houghton.
Yeah.
She played in a Big Finish story, as well as a character in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Right. Yes. Yep. So that's kind of cool that they kind of keep in the Doctor Who
the
universe
family.
in the family. Yeah. That's kind of cool. Especially it's kind of neat that they're still kind of involved with it after all these years. I mean, because again, this is 1971, and just here it is 40 years later. They're still involved with with that world, and I think that's cool.
Yep.
Guest cast. Now, obviously, we've got the return of Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. We've got Richard Franklin as Mike Yates, John Levine, Sergeant John Benton, and this is one of the early appearances of Roger Delgado as the first Master.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool to see him. And it's kind of interesting because in this episode we see the Master smoking cigars a lot, which I thought was, you don't really see the Master smoking a lot. But
yeah, I've got that in my notes here. He wasn't a smoker, and he kind of didn't want to do that, but that Cohn was just like, no, it fits the role. Because
I didn't remember it being in the script.
Yeah, first and only time we ever see him smoking.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We have Fernanda Marlowe as Corporal Carol Bell.
Mm-hmm.
She's only referred to as Corporal Bell in this, but later fiction and whatnot kind of gave her the first name Caroline, which I think is a very sly pun. Bells, Carol. Yeah, I see what you did there.
Right.
She's only appeared in one other televised story. She appeared in The Claws of Axos.
Yeah.
Which is a later one that comes after this one. So it's kind of interesting, though, hey, there was actually a somewhat notable female unit officer back in the day. So kind of progressive, even though she essentially is served with the role of getting the Brigadier coffee.
The coffee, yeah.
Or making phone calls or something. So, but she's there. So I guess that's progress for 1971.
Lay on some coffee.
Exactly. Yeah, she and you talked about Pixen Lim, and now we get the return of Michael Sheard, who is an actor that's appeared in a lot of Doctor Who. We've talked about a lot of these episodes we've already covered here on Next Up Everywhere, but so I'll probably run him down one more time because you never get enough of Michael Sheard in Doctor Who.
No, he's plenty of times in the Doctor Who yearbook.
Yeah, here he plays Dr. Roland Summers, but he played first he played Rose in the William Hartnell story The Ark, And probably a lot of people know him as playing Lawrence Scarman in The Pyramids of Mars, a Tom Baker classic. Then he played Lowe in The Invisible Enemy, which we talked about with Joe Corellia not too long ago, here on Next Stop Everywhere. And he played Murgrave in one of my favorite stories, Castrovalva, because it's from the Peter Davison's first story. And he played the headmaster at the Coal Hill School in Remembrance of the Daleks, what a lot of fans consider the 25th anniversary story of Doctor Who, even though Silver Nemesis was the official 25th anniversary. But I think a lot of us consider Remembrance of the Daleks a much better story than Silver Nemesis.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, by far.
Yeah. So I kind of like, okay, that's the 25th anniversary that they should have had recognized. But obviously, if you're a movie buff, especially in the 80s, he was in The Empire Strikes Back, and he was also in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and as John referenced in his notes to me, because he kind of helped me out on notes here, and I'm very appreciative of that. So I'm going to give him points for that. He's played Hitler a lot. Like, what, 5 times, you said?
5 times, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's good. It keeps him working, so it probably kept food on his table. But
that's what I was thinking.
But I'm not sure okay, do you really want to be known as the go-to guy to play Hitler in the production? Okay, but hey, like I said, whatever pays the bills, right? Simon Lack played Professor Kettering, and he played a character named Zadok, I can't remember which, in The Androids of Tara. Obviously a classic from the Key to Time season of Tom Baker. Neil McCarthy played Barnum, and he played Thawne in another Key to Time story, The Power of Kroll. Kroll. But most notably, if you're a fan of the kind of cheesy, but in a cool 80s cheesy way movie, Clash of the Titans, the original Clash of the Titans, from 1981, he played Calibos, and he was a very cool character in that. And he's also in the movie Time Bandits, which is another classic from the 80s that a lot of us 80s fans appreciate. William Marlowe played Mailer, and this guy is pretty interesting, and with a lot of information that John passed along to me. In addition to playing Lester in Revenge of the Cybermen, a Tom Baker classic, or well, not really classic, but from his first season. He was married to Catherine Schell, who played the Countess Scarleone in one of Tom Baker's, I think, finest stories, City of Death, written by Douglas Adams. And she's the woman that Tom Baker utters the classic line, "You're a beautiful woman, probably." Which I love that put down.
That's great.
It's brilliant, and of course Tom delivers it so well. And he was also married to Kismet Delgado, who played most notably the voice of the Queen Spider in Planet of the Spiders, Jon Pertwee's final story. But obviously, if you recognize the name, she was the widow of Roger Delgado, who passed during the Pertwee era. So obviously, she hooked up with William Marlowe at some point after that. So that's interesting. I guess they travel in the same Doctor Who circles. So one thing led to another, I guess. Well, probably from some party somewhere led to another.
The fact that the BBC only has 12 actors.
Well, apparently Michael Sheard's one of them,
right? Because
he's in so many Doctor Who stories. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting, I thought. All right. Anything else about the cast before we move on to our main topics?
This is one of the ones where the BBC urged Barry Letts to actually use Chinese actors. Where further down the line they said, no, just get a British actor to play Lee Sen Chang.
Right. Well, I thought it was interesting because Pik Sen Lim isn't Chinese; she's Malaysian. So, not exactly a Chinese actress playing a Chinese character, but again, it's the 70s, and if you You were lucky just to get an Asian person to play a Chinese person at that point, and not just somebody like if you watched The Talons of Wang Chiang, where you have a white actor made up to look like an Asian person. So I guess good job in casting an Asian actor for an Asian role in that story. Actually, two, if you count the that replacement Chinese delegate.
Oh, Fu Peng.
Yeah, Fu Peng. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they got two in there. So points there, I guess.
And Pik-Sen Lim, she actually taught Jon Pertwee the Hokkien that he was speaking in the episode.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she gave him pointers, and like while they were filming it,
right.
He would do a couple lines. They would stop filming, and then she would give him some more, and so he could get the dialect right.
Right. So that's cool. I didn't know that. That's excellent. Yeah. I kind of wondered if somebody coached him, but I didn't realize it was probably. I guess I should have guessed it was Pik-Sen Lim. So yeah, that's cool. All right. Anything else?
No. So far so good.
All right. Let's dive into our main topics then. First topic, obviously, right off the bat, we got to talk the Third Doctor, and we got to talk about Joe Grant. And this is kind of like this is still early in their relationship.
Yeah.
This is still Katy Manning's first season on Doctor Who, and I think by this episode, after a few episodes, they really kind of settle in, and they seem pretty comfortable with each other at this point, I think. They have, especially in the scenes where they're kind of locked up in the cell together. Yeah. And Joe is taking care of the Doctor, or trying to. And it just seemed like they have a much, the Doctor has kind of gotten off his high horse because of Joe replacing Liz, who was a scientist. And, they bring in this kind of like goofy, quirky young girl to replace her. So, but I think by this point, they seem pretty settled in, and and their chemistry, I think, really starts taking off around this time.
Yeah, they're just a lot more comfortable with each other.
Yeah. So, what did you make of the Third Doctor and Joe in this one?
Well, right after the accident, the Third Doctor, he's involved. He just because of what happened with Barnum with the Keller machine, he's even when Mike Yates says the brig needs you to come back, he does not want to go. He wants to take care of this thing till the finish, and the fact that he just wants to destroy it, and they're just like, well, it's not ours. We don't have the right to do that. He's set on taking care of this thing.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things I like, in addition to them, getting along with each other, like I talked about, I like how Joe is supportive, of the Third Doctor by this point. She kind of butts heads with Kettering and the others. The Doctor is talking about, hey, that machine's evil, and they're just like, what are you talking about? It's fine. And Joe's just like, you really should listen to him. He's a genius.
Yeah, she stands by him the whole time.
And, and I guess because maybe, I know they're not probably going to listen to her, but I think they're listening to her more than they are the Doctor at this point.
Yeah.
And she's trying her best, but I do love the fact that she's trying to be supportive of him at this point, even though they don't really haven't known each other all that long.
And even though they haven't known each other very long, she is very strong in the story.
Yes.
She elects to stay behind when he goes back to UNIT,
right,
in a prison that's already had a number of riots in the story, by that time.
Right.
And she actually stops one of the riots too.
Right. You would kind of think she would be the more of the object of sexual gratification in this story, because going to a prison, a woman in a male prison,
the only woman in a male prison.
Exactly. So you think she would be treated a little more poorly, but again, this is a family show, so you're not going to see something like that. But I think if it was being made today, maybe you would see something more like that, at least a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And
just to address it and acknowledge it.
Right. And just going back to a real small bit of trivia, the BBC was kind of unsure about them using a prison
right.
as the main setting in a family-oriented show.
Right.
So.
Which kind of, again, shows you the kind of time difference that we're dealing with, the difference in values and whatnot compared to today, because nowadays they wouldn't give that a second thought.
Right, exactly.
Now, one of the things I do like about Jo in this story is that she kind of like looks after what's his name?
Barnum.
Barnum, thank you. Yeah, in this story, she after he's been subjected to the Keller machine and essentially been reduced to the mentality of a child.
Mm-hmm.
He's had all the quote unquote evil taken away, stripped out of him. And she looks out for him. She's concerned about him, and she's immediately concerned about his well-being. Like, is he being fed? Or is he being taken care of? And I kind of find that refreshing. It shows Jo is a compassionate person, and is caring for others. That especially in this kind of this prison-like environment where obviously the prison officials and the someone like what's his face, Kettering doesn't really think that much of the prisoners. It's just more of a like they're like guinea pigs to Kettering, and Jo meanwhile obviously is more concerned about the what happened to him afterwards, and like, well, okay, what's going to happen to him now? And I kind of really like that.
Well, I think that one of the reasons too is because they're always separating her and Dr. Summers.
Right.
They're only together a few times and then they get separated. So she's the only one that can actually look after Barnum.
Right.
And when you got the rest of the guards and the prison staff, they're more worried about the riots and what's going on with the inmates.
Right.
Who's going to care about Barnum? Right,
and it makes it all the more tragic when by the end of the story, Barnum gets killed, and Jo is just who has just spent the previous 6 episodes like caring for this guy and looking out for his well-being, and it just because he helps the doctor one last time ends up paying the price for it. As people who aren't companions and sometimes are companions tend to do. Being around the doctor. The proximity around the doctor is kind of a dangerous thing sometimes, especially on this show. So yeah, you kind of feel for her. She has a little bit of a moment, but I think they could have given her a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. After all,
it seemed kind of like they glossed over it a little quickly. I mean, obviously, maybe for time. But yeah, it would have been nice if Jo had been given a little bit longer of a scene to kind of maybe just lament his passing. I guess maybe maybe not fully.
The time was such a factor in this episode too,
right? Because it seems like Jo would be kind of pretty upset about that after the way she acted about him. But I found that really interesting. And you talked about Jo, wanting to stay behind. During all the riots and whatnot, there were moments where like she had, she gets a hold of a gun and she's ready to go shoot somebody if necessary, because hey, she's unit personnel.
Yeah, she's a trained operative.
Exactly, some trained operative, and you would think the doctor would have a problem with that, but they hadn't really established the doctor's attitude about guns by this point. I think that came along obviously much later in the series. So looking back, why do you think the doctor seemed okay with the idea of like Jo potentially shooting people if necessary, or just more as protection to defend herself?
Yeah, I don't think he really knew a whole lot about what was going on while he was away from the prison. He just found out that there was a riot and they stopped it.
Okay, so you think that just he was oblivious to what she was doing? Okay, no, that's fair.
There's never really a spot where they say, well, okay, well she held off the riot and she got a gun and all this. Right. They just say that it was taken care of.
Yeah. Now the doctor obviously has a confrontation with the master, who we're going to talk about in a minute. But he has a nice little. He's kind of taunted by the Master, and at the end of the story, he kind of he's not sure he won this one.
Mm-hmm.
The Master gets away again, and is left to kind of roam time and space in his TARDIS, while the Doctor's stuck on Earth, still in his exile. And the Master even taunts him about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that great final scene where he's just going like, look, the Master gets to run around the entire time and space, and I'm stuck here with you, Brigadier.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that scene?
Oh, I loved it. Just the look on Nicholas Courtney's face when he's after he says that's classic.
Yeah, I just loved, Pertwee always had this great delivery with the Brigadier. Just the kind of like a little bit of an arrogance, but more indignation, I think. And, just that little hint of outrage about everything, and the unfairness of it all, I think, of the bitterness of being stuck in exile.
Yeah, but they were still friends.
But they were still friends, exactly. Yeah. It's like, they butted heads, but in kind of like Spock and McCoy kind of way on Star Trek.
Yeah, pretty much. And,
the opposites, kind of butting head, but still have that underlying relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that kind of comes through when the Brigadier shows up and saves the Doctor from being killed by Mailer.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like that. I thought that was good. So, anything about the Third Doctor and Joe that struck your interest before we move on?
If I think of anything else that's not in my notes, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, all right. Sounds good. I like that plan. All right, let's move on to our second topic.
Mm-hmm.
Second topic I want to talk about the Master, as in the first Master, the definitive Master, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
In the Keller machine, or I guess it should be more the Master machine, because, the Master ends up posing as a guy named Emil Keller to create this machine. So really it's his, although it goes a little beyond his control.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting to talk about. And obviously, we might as well talk about Chin Lee and Mailer while we're at it, because Chin Lee is kind of like I'd say she's an unwilling ally of his, because she's hypnotized under his control, but Mailer seems more like a hired goon to help him in the prison, and after the Mailer and his guys take it over. So what do you think? What are your thoughts about the Master in this story?
I loved him in this story. I mean, it's this story is so multi-layered to begin with, and just to know that the Master has his finger on the pulse of every single thing that's going on. I mean, he's got the Keller machine that apparently he created. Right. I'm sure he found that alien being somewhere and put it in a jar and turned it into the Keller machine. But he's got the prison riots that he's starting with by using the machine. Mm-hmm. He knows about the Thunderbolt. I mean, there's a lot going on in here, and he just has he knows exactly what he's doing at every point in the time in this story.
Well, in his first appearance in Terror of the Autons, he's essentially in kind of an exile at that point, because the Doctor gets a hold of his dematerialization circuit.
Right.
And so he can't leave Earth. And so he's obviously been busy since then. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of come up with this very rather convoluted plan, which boils down to, okay, I want to fire a missile and start World War III so that I can pick up the pieces and take over.
Mm-hmm.
That's his plan. That's the basic gist of it.
Right.
So your plan is to rule a nuclear wasteland. Well done. Go for it.
Oh, it's not as convoluted as some of his later schemes.
But my point is, it's a convoluted way to go about what is essentially a very basic goal.
Right.
Because he's, like I said, he's hypnotizing Chin Lee to disrupt this peace conference in the hopes that, hey, maybe China and the USA and we'll get all pissed off at each other and attack each other and cause World War III. And when they end up killing the American ambassador or delegate rather, and after the Chinese delegate was killed, but they sent in a replacement in Fu Peng, then, just the whole idea of like, okay, I'm going to invent this machine to get inside Stangmore Prison and cause this riot and take over the prison so that I can use the vehicles to help me with my plan to launch this Thunderbolt, to get the guys so that I can hijack the Thunderbolt missile.
His own little private army.
Right. Which I'm thinking, well, couldn't he just hire one? Why does he have to go through this whole business with the prison? I don't get that at all. And then, in the process of creating this Keller machine and posing as Emil Keller to do this, he essentially creates a creature from all the evil that's been drawn out of these prisoners, and it becomes sentient to the point where it becomes this powerful mental force that even his vaunted intellect can't even handle eventually. And so that he has to be careful around it. So what did you make of this entirely convoluted plan, or convoluted way about going about this plan?
I think it's just classic Master. I mean, a lot of the plans that he comes up with, there's so many things that he didn't need to do.
Right.
It's just to get to his ultimate goal, but hey, it makes for good television.
Yeah, well, and then also we have to kind of keep in mind that, hey, the Master's nuts.
Yeah.
So he's not exactly thinking clearly. He's a bit insane, I think.
I think if it was the Ronnie,
right.
I think it would have been a lot different. But
right, well, because the Ronnie would have been more pragmatic about it, and just said, "Okay, what do I need to get this done?" And although she had a fondness for disguises too, so who knows? But I just thought it was interesting. Anything else about the Master in this one? Now, I know. What did you think of the Master realizing that the Keller machine was too powerful for him even to control?
Well, that scene where he realizes that, it's just like, okay, it's like okay, here's something that he had control of, and all of a sudden it's gotten stronger than him, and just the look on his face is just it's classic. It's just like, okay, well, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, exactly.
So what does he do? He just runs out of there.
Yeah, his whole plan is just like, okay, I'm gonna get out of there. I'm gonna barricade it, and I guess I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm not gonna do anything with this thing that I went through all this trouble to create. Because hey, it just I guess it didn't work out. It wasn't my plan. Like
it backfired.
It backfired on him. All Wile E. Coyote super genius.
Right.
And it didn't quite work. Blew up in his face, essentially.
The only thing was missing was a big Acme sticker on it.
Exactly, or like maybe holding up a little tiny sign that says "Help," right before everything goes completely horribly wrong. Yes, that's an obscure Looney Tunes reference for you youngins. One of the things I thought was interesting is that after that moment where he kind of realizes that the Keller machine has gotten out of his control, he admits to the Third Doctor. He goes, "Yeah, about that Keller machine. Yeah, it's because the Doctor's saying, well, has it, you're having trouble controlling that thing, aren't you?" And he's like, "I'm reluctantly forced to admit, yeah, I am." So I thought it was like,
that's just classic Master right there.
That was great. I just love that moment. Basically, he's gonna having to swallow his pride enough and go, "Okay, you got me on that one. I'll give you that one."
Well, the same thing happened in Terror of the Autons, though.
Oh, that's true. It did. You're absolutely right. That's a good point. All right.
He doesn't think his plan's through all the way.
No, or just that, or he doesn't. The Master kind of thinks I think he thinks more impulsively. Like I have this great idea. I'm going to go through this great plan, but he doesn't think about long-term ramifications of it.
Right.
Kind of like when the Anthony Alien Master did that whole business in Legopolis, where he essentially gets rid of the people of Legopolis, or he tries to take control of the CVE. And essentially, he causes what looks to be, at the time, like the eventual death of the universe.
Of everything, yeah.
Of everything. And he just like, okay, I guess I'm working with the fact that, hey, okay, I guess I'll just, come up with a backup plan and figure out a way to kind of stop that and use that to kind of blackmail the entire universe into subjugating under my control.
Mm-hmm. And eventually he's just like, okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah, he's like, okay, yep, see ya.
Right.
He flips over Tom Baker and causes him to fall to his death, and he's like, bye. Oh, Master, will you never learn?
Right. He's always thinking about the means, but it's never the end.
Exactly. So like I said, I think he thinks impulsively, but he doesn't think down the road, like, okay, what problems could this present to me? Mm-hmm. He's just more like that, sees a goal, goes after that goal, doesn't think about anything else. Mm-hmm. Very tunnel vision, I think, the Master is. All right. Anything else about the Master or the Keller Machine or even Chin-Li or Mailer in this one?
The Keller Machine, I thought that was just a really cool concept.
Yeah.
Especially after it became sentient and started traveling on its own throughout the prison.
Yeah, it starts
really cool.
It starts teleporting. Mm-hmm. Which, okay, I don't know how it could do that. But
Time Lord technology? I don't know.
Well, psychic energy, I guess,
right.
because it's so powerfully, it's got such mental abilities. But yeah, it just, obviously it doesn't have any wheels or anything, so it kind of gets around the prison, pops up at inopportune moments. Mm-hmm. Like, somebody would be in a room, and then all of a sudden the Keller Machine pops up and starts going wow, 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 mm-hmm. and whamming people with it. And so I guess that made it more of a threat. I'm kind of glad they did that, because otherwise the simple way to avoid it would just don't go in the room and you'll be fine. Yeah.
And the fact that it was set in a prison, that was just like a smorgasbord for the thing.
Right, because you're surrounded by all these criminals that are very emotional, and they're, it causes all these riots when it's kind of like doing its thing. Mm-hmm. It kind of heightened the tension, I think, in the episode, and it made for good drama.
Right. Even the fact that when there wasn't an inmate in the room, it could have been somebody else. There's still evil thoughts in everyone's minds.
Right.
It could feed off of that, but then here comes Barnum, who has nothing in his mind except for pure thoughts, because it's been taken out. I just love the fact that it's firing up, it's getting ready to get going. All of a sudden, Barnum walks in the room. It's like, there he goes. Yeah,
essentially, it's like, okay, he's been sucked dry of all the evil because it's been pulled out of him. So essentially, the Keller Machine has nothing to feed on.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, Fritz is out and is like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just going to wait till somebody else comes by and I can snack on them.
Right. It's like, I cleaned that plate already.
Exactly. Pretty
much.
It's like, bring in another course. Bring in this next course. I'm done with this guy. I'm pushing this plate to the side. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on to our third topic. And this, of course, is UNIT. Mm-hmm. The United Nations Intelligence Task Force, back when it was just, you could say United Nations when it comes to UNIT, before the United Nations got all miffed and got in a huff about it and stopped Doctor Who from calling it the United Nations Intelligence Task Force. So they had to become the Unified Intelligence Task Force.
Yep.
But hey, Unified does have UN in the title, so that works. So obviously I want to talk about the Brigadier here, Mike Yates, of course, and Sergeant Benton. So Brigadier's pretty active in this one, especially in the last couple of episodes. And he starts off, like he's kind of dozing at his desk, but later he really gets some good scenes, especially when he's trying to infiltrate the prison.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best scenes ever.
And so I want to talk about that. And then Mike Yates, essentially kind of like their advanced recon guy, gets into a little trouble, and then Sergeant Benton gets chewed out by the Brigadier early in the story, and then ends up becoming the acting governor of the prison. So he kind of, I guess, somehow flipped that around.
Yeah, redeemed himself somehow.
So what did you think about the characters in this one?
Well, I think UNIT in general in this story, they seem to be like it was a different aspect of UNIT. I mean, as opposed to the intelligence task force that we've always known and loved, they're more of a security team in this.
Right.
They were working security on the peace conference, and like I said before, with the story being multi-layered, they had a lot going on with this. They had the peace conference, then they had to. They found out they were going to be escorting the Thunderbolt, and then they get involved with Stangmore Prison. So there was a lot going on with them, but they pulled it off.
Right. Yeah, because essentially, UNIT up until this point had essentially been a militarized version of the X-Files, where they would go out to explore strange phenomena, and with the Doctor's help, obviously address it and deal with it. But here, they're essentially just hired security guards.
Yeah.
Not sure why UNIT was brought in instead of the regular military for this. Maybe they're cheaper. I don't know. But it seems kind of strange. And the problem, though, is I think that with this attempt at being security personnel, it doesn't really work out. I mean, you've got a bunch of dead delegates.
Right.
And, in a prison that's, almost overwhelmed during this riot and whatnot. So, as a result, I think of probably a lot of government officials after this incident probably said, maybe we'll just let them deal with our little, strange phenomena cases from this point.
And the only other time they were used as a security team was in Day of the Daleks.
Yeah.
And that was
and that was another peace conference, wasn't it?
Right. Uh-huh.
So yeah, it seemed like, okay, we'll try them, but it doesn't really seem to work out ever.
Yeah, we're security, but the Chinese delegate's dead. First the papers are missing, and then he's dead.
Yeah, UNIT's track record isn't always the greatest.
No.
If you notice, which is probably why their funding has been cut in the current series. But, just doesn't really look all that great. And so the Brigadier, Brigadier, like I talked about, he chews out Benton.
Oh, yeah.
which you mentioned was a great scene.
That's one of my quotes.
Because Benton essentially is tasked with keeping tabs on Chin Lee. Mm-hmm. He's dressed in plain clothes, and he's kind of following her around. But he gets affected by the Keller machine.
Yeah.
And which is interesting because the Keller machine's so far away.
Mm-hmm. But she's got that amplifier on the back of her.
This is
true. Her ear.
That's true. This is true. So Benton ends up passing out, and his head falls between these bars on this railing, and we kind of wondered what if he got his head stuck in there? But watching that, but he goes back and has to kind of tell the Brigadier, well, yeah, I kind of lost Chun Li, and because I fainted. Mm-hmm. And the Brigadier doesn't really accept this excuse, does he?
No, he does not.
He's like, he makes this one, cheap shot. He goes, oh, I guess, intelligence work is a little too much for you, huh, Benton? And
why don't you go lie down?
Why don't you go lie down? And he's like, oh, okay. Benton goes, and that just infuriates the Brigadier even more. Uh-huh. And he's just like, get out of my sight.
Right. That was one of my favorite lines.
That was a really great scene.
But if you notice too, when I'm thinking probably because it was the same director.
Yeah.
When Benton when he fell down and his head went between those two bars.
Yeah.
The Silurians. When I can't think of what his name was, when he came back to London and he was getting sick.
Yeah.
He had the virus, and when he eventually fell down.
Yeah.
Almost the same shot.
I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I remember. Mm-hmm. I kind of remember that now. Yeah. That's another great observation. Yeah, I think that, but it did. I didn't realize he directed the Silurians. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't. Was it Timothy Combe? Yeah. That was it was pretty interesting that you bring that up. I really like that. So Benton essentially has to spend most of the episode trying to get back in the Brigadier's good graces again.
Right. And
then finally he does enough that the Brigadier, after things have settled down at the prison, and practically most of the important people are dead by this point, or the Brigadier assigns him the role of acting governor. And so Benton's very thankful. He's like, "Thank you, sir." And he starts to kind of sit down and look all important at the acting governor's desk. And Brigadier makes this comment about, like, "Hey, don't let this go to your head."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, I won't. Nope."
And I think it was the first time the phone rang. He picked it up and he says, "Sergeant," and then he says, "Acting Governor Benton."
Yeah. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, he loved that.
Yeah, he did. And so he kind of he got to be in charge a little bit for once, and I'm sure he kind of and John Levine, John always seems like he just has this great comedic flair.
Yeah.
And makes Benton so likable. Mm-hmm. So that you feel bad for when the Brigadier's chewing him out, because he's just such an average relatable guy. And
well, yeah, fair too.
He's lower in the ranks,
right?
So you kind of identify with him more than I think you do Mike Yates.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Yates, he's essentially he's a captain, so he's higher ranking, so he gets to do more of the more active, important things for unit.
And he could be a jerk to Benton at times too.
And ultimately, he kind of betrays everybody in that Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Where then he has to kind of redeem himself in Planet of the Spiders a little bit, even though he's no longer affiliated with Unit. So,
right.
But anything else about these characters?
I like Mike Yates in this one. I really did, because it's he had more of an action role to it.
Right.
He was when they had the convoy, he was in charge of that.
Right.
And he was constantly in touch with the Brigadier to let him know what was going on.
Yeah, he was basically the Brigadier's guy in the field.
Yeah.
He had some kind of like a station base somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's one of Richard Franklin's best times playing Mike Yates.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you on that one. And of course, love the Brigadier going undercover as kind of delivery guys to bring some supplies into the prison.
Yeah, and
use that as guys to essentially create like a Trojan horse, where they drive this lorry truck into the prison, and then it's kind of a funny scene. You see unit guys just crawling behind it. They're just kind of marching along with it and hoping nobody sees them until they can. Like there's that guard, at the gate. They take him out, and then they're kind of just following the van or the truck as it goes inside the prison, and hope that they can start shooting other people before they get shot. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, well, why didn't they just burst out of the truck?
Yeah, they looked so funny, just right behind that truck, just stepping as quietly as they could.
Yeah, exactly. We're just going to come out of nowhere, and just that was pretty funny. But yeah. All right. Anything else about Unit before we move on?
They probably had one of the best battle scenes that we've ever seen from Unit.
That was a really extended shootout sequence between Unit and the guys that had taken over, the prisoners that had taken over the prison. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty, a lot of more casualties on Unit, and probably as much as the prisoners themselves, I think. Mm-hmm. Because it seems like every time one of the prisoners would get shot by Unit, you'd turn around, next time it'd be right there. A unit guard would be taken.
One of the unit guys,
soldier would be taken down.
Yep.
So, and they weren't shy about showing death scenes in that.
No,
So I'm sure. I'm sure Mary Whitehouse had fun with that.
Oh, I'm sure she did. But I think this was one of the first stories that they used. Even in the credits, action by Havoc.
Yes.
The stunt team.
Yeah, the stunt team. Yeah.
Yeah. They did all the stunts with when they were going up the ropes going into the prison, and it was
pretty well choreographed, I thought.
Oh, very well. Yeah.
Especially for 1971 Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty good action. I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed it, watching it for the first time back in the 70s. All right. Anything else about the story before we move on to favorite quotes?
I don't think so. I think
All
we're
right.
doing good.
Okay. You got any favorite lines from this story?
Well, we talked about the first one with the Brigadier and Benton, and Benton's Brigadier says to him, he says, "Throbbing in the head, you fainted." Says, "You're too delicate for intelligence work, but you better go lie down." And Ben's just like, "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." And there's just a look on his face, which is classic.
Yeah.
He was so ticked off at him.
That was funny. I liked a early exchange. When Kettering's making his big speech, to the press and whatnot, to everybody.
Oh yeah.
And he's talking. He's just trying to brag on himself a little bit during this presentation. And he goes, Kettering says, "Science has abolished the hangman's noose and substituted this infallible method." And the doctor replies, he's kind of whispering really loudly to Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, he goes, "People who talk about infallibility and are usually on very shaky grounds." And just there's a lot of that, just that interrupting by the doctor, and to the point where Kettering gets flummoxed and just goes like, "Look, can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish
right,
here?"
to the less knowledgeable members, or whatever,
Exactly.
however he says it.
And it just immediately, just this hate for the doctor, you could just see it just oozing right through. And I think the doctor returns that contempt, because of just how appalled he is. Because this doctor, he's very morally outraged by especially when scientists are abusing science.
Right.
And for this case, in the sense that they're affecting men's minds, even though they're prisoners, and using them as guinea pigs in this. And
right.
So obviously the doctor has problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other lines you liked?
Between the Brigadier and the doctor, when the Brigadier says, "We're going to see the new Chinese delegate, Mr. Fu Peng," and the doctor says, "Fu Peng must be Hokkien." The Brigadier says, No, he's Chinese. Now let's go."
Yeah, now come along. Yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's like, for those who don't know, Hokkien is a region in China. So it's in the south.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the south. So yes. Yeah, all right. So I thought it was pretty funny. So obviously the Brigadier was not up on that.
Nope.
And that was kind of funny. Then when the doctor is speaking Hokkien to the Chinese delegate, and the Brigadier, who doesn't speak a word of Chinese, is completely lost.
Yeah, he's just standing there.
And the delegate doesn't respect the Brigadier at all. He's giving all the attention on the doctor because the doctor's speaking his language, and being what he sees as very polite as a result, respectful, and he just completely ignores the Brigadier. He's going basically, whatever, talk to the hand, Brigadier. And I love that exchange.
He basically tells them what they're going to have for dinner.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. All right, any other lines?
It's not there's no speaking lines in this scene at all, but I think it's one of the best in the story. In episode 3, the master's being chauffeured to Stangmore Prison, and he's sitting there in his chair. He's got his cigar,
right,
and you hear the menacing music going on. All of a sudden, he turns off the music on the transistor radio.
Yes.
As you're watching it, you're thinking
like, is that the incidental music?
Incidental music, and then that's what he's listening to.
Right.
It's perfect.
That was funny. That was a funny gag.
I still love that.
That's a funny gag. I like the exchange. Obviously, after the Brigadier shoots Mailer, this classic exchange, where the doctor says, "Thank you, Brigadier, but do you think that for once in your life you can manage to arrive before the nick of time?" And the Brigadier replies, "I'm glad to see you too, Doctor."
Yes. Just the between the two of them, it's just perfect.
The bantering, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Any other lines?
No, that was it for me.
All right, I got one more. The Master. This is toward the end of the episode, or end of episode 6. The Master is basically calling the doctor to kind of rub it in his face that, he's stuck in exile while the Master can run around time and space. And the Master goes, "Ah, Doctor, I was afraid that you'd be worried about me, so I thought I'd let you know that I'm alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor replies, "I'm extremely sorry to hear that." So
yeah, it's just perfect between them.
That was great. All right, what's your rating for this one?
This one, it's like I said, it's a personal favorite of mine. It's not perfect, so I gave it 9 out of 10 bad prison meals.
Okay, that's good. I give it 8.5 out of 10. I'm a little less than you. Thunderbolt missiles.
Nice.
Yeah, so I like that a lot. All right, because this is a classic Doctor Who story, we're not going to reverse the polarity. We're going to reverse it. We're going to reverse the reversal. So we're reversing the polarity. We're reversing the reverse the polarity segment here. So we're going to go forward in time, and this was a little tough one to kind of come up with a story that kind of seems similar. But I decided on the Crimson Horror.
Okay.
This was the 11th episode from Series 7 in 2013, written by Mark Gatiss. And in this one, if you remember, this takes place in 1893, where we have Madame Vastra, Jenny, her human wife, and their Sontaran butler Strax, asked to investigate the Crimson Horror, a mysterious cause of death in which victims are found dumped in a canal with bright red skin. In this one, the latest victim, Edmund, has the image of the Doctor retained in his retina. And as a result, Vastra, Jenny, and Strax travel to Yorkshire, where Jenny infiltrates Sweetville, a utopian community led by chemist and engineer Mrs. Winifred Gilliflower, and the never-seen Mr. Sweet. Jenny discovers that the Doctor is chained up while exhibiting red skin and a stiff stature, but at his silent direction, she puts him into a chamber to reverse the process. Once restored, he explains that he and Clara were also investigating the Crimson Horror and also infiltrated Sweetville, but were learned they were to be preserved to survive an apocalypse. The process didn't work on the Doctor because he wasn't human, and he was saved from being destroyed by Mrs. Gilliflower's blind daughter, Ada. The Doctor finds Clara and reverses the process on her, while Vastra realizes Sweetville is using the venom of a prehistoric red leech that the Silurians knew. The Doctor and Clara confront Mrs. Gilliflower, who reveals she has plans, and this is the connection I made to this story. Mm-hmm. She has plans to launch a rocket to spread the poison all over the skies, where everyone on Earth will die except those, quote, perfect people she preserved, who will then start over to make a better world. So, just like the Master, Mrs. Gilliflower decides to, launch a rocket and cause an apocalypse, which she'll use to take over with whatever's left.
And the Thunderbolt had nerve gas in it. So.
Exactly. So that's yeah, you're right. So that's another connection I forgot. Mr. Sweet, of course, is revealed to be a red leech from Vastra's prehistoric times that formed a symbiotic relationship with Mrs. Gilliflower. The Doctor calls out Mrs. Gilliflower for blinding Ada in her attempts to get the venom perfected, the formula perfected. And the preservation formula, right, excuse me, while Clara smashes the controls to the rocket. However, Mrs. Gilliflower holds a gun to Ada's head and heads into the rocket silo, which has been disguised as a chimney, to reach the secondary controls. Mrs. Gilliflower launches the rocket, but Vastra and Jenny had removed the red leech poison, rendering it worthless. Strax shoots at Mrs. Gilliflower to stop her from killing the others, causing her to plummet to the bottom of the silo. As the old woman lays dying, Mr. Sweet abandons his host, and Ada shares final words with her horrible mother before brutally killing the parasite with her cane. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much it. I won't worry about the cliffhanger that's tacked onto that, but with, Angie and Artie Mayfield. So, but that's pretty much the story. So, yeah, essentially, this if you're kind of in the mood for hey, bad guy wants to use a rocket to cause an apocalypse and take over, then I recommend the Crimson Horror.
It's a fun story.
It's a fun story, and so a lot of fun. You can't go wrong with a Paternoster gang story.
No.
So I hope that was at least a somewhat decent connection. Unless you had something better to recommend.
No, I was wondering what you're going to do with this one.
All right. So, We did get some feedback that I want to write down real quick. We got the first, Hannah Scorapa, who wrote to us regarding the wedding of Sarah Jane Smith. She got that one in a little late, but I wanted to kind of read hers to catch up because Hannah's a newer listener and always glad to have new listeners. So thank you, Hannah, for writing in once again. She goes, "Greetings, Charles and Jesse. Glad you're delving once more into the broader Hooniverse with the Sarah Jane adventures." Yeah, wasn't that fun? Seeing as this doctor features David Tennant, who is my doctor, I figured that I had to sit down and watch it with you guys. Admittedly, this is my first time seeing this episode in its entirety, as I had never done a full chronological watch of the Sarah Jane adventures, but I'm familiar enough with the characters and the overall format. Let me start off by saying that it was such a treat to see Elizabeth Sladen again as Sarah Jane Smith. It's always a treat to see her as Sarah Jane Smith, in my opinion, because, you can't go wrong. She's tremendous. I read that she loved returning to the role for the spinoff, and her performance is absolutely fantastic, full of compassion, sharp wit, and assertiveness. It was a shame that we lost her at such a young age to cancer. Yeah, cancer sucks, everybody. I would have loved to have seen Liz subsequently interact with Peter Capaldi and Jodie Whittaker in more crossover episodes. Yeah, wouldn't that have been lovely?
Yeah, that would have been great.
I'm sure Peter would have loved that, being such an old school fan as he is.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of cool to see her with Jodie as well. Her reaction, if nothing else, to seeing the Doctor as a woman. Let's see here. I am, however, glad that Russell T Davies made the executive decision not to recast Sarah Jane in order to continue the series, as the wound of the loss was still fresh and it would have been greatly disrespectful to the memory of Mrs. Sladen. I hope that one day we'll see Sarah Jane again, either in book form or in an ongoing Titan comics series. Well, that'd be cool. I'd love to write that, by the way. So if you know anybody at Titan Comics, I'd love to make that happen. Just putting that out there. Putting the sad stuff aside, this episode is a blast. You can tell that all the actors involved are having the time of their lives, especially the Bannerman Road gang. The young actors do a good job of conveying the conflicting thoughts of their characters, how they want to be happy and excited for Sarah Jane, but they can't shake their suspicions that something isn't quite right with Peter Dalton. I also adore the banter at the beginning episode between K9 and Mr. Smith. I view it as the 2009 equivalent of a petty argument between Siri and Alexa. That's cute. I like that. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room, the Doctor himself, though I doubt the wedding invitation would have reached him on Metebelis 3. Perhaps Sarah Jane should have suggested the Eye of Orion instead. Oh, I like what you did there. I'm aware that this episode was filmed after the end of time, but the story is set after the Stolen Earth / Journey's End. But David Tennant is still in top form in spite of him having technically thrown in the towel. I love how the 10th Doctor engages with the kids without talking down to them, much like what this show does as a whole. Yeah, I love the fact that the kids are treated like, competent and, they don't have to be pandered to. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm also so glad we get to see him being energetic, fast-talking, and enjoying himself overall in spite of the dire situation. I personally didn't care for the direction that the writers took the character of the 10th Doctor during the year of the specials, as I feel he become progressively more nihilistic. I'm not very fond of the conversation that he has with Wilf about regeneration in the end of time. Yeah, neither am I. That's one of my beefs about that story. I'm glad to see that a post-Donna 10th Doctor story exists where we, the audience, aren't viciously clubbed over the head with reminders of the upcoming regeneration or the Time Lord victorious underlying darkness stuff. In regards to nitpicks, I only have a couple. I did not care for the CGI on the creature Sarah Jane rescued from eBay at the beginning of the episode, as it has not aged well. Yeah, well, it's 2009 CGI, so yeah. I'm not sure why a puppet wasn't used, as I recall that this series seemed to do a decent job in that department. Also, why do aliens continue to invade Earth within the Hooniverse? I thought about this when the characters were discussing the Trickster's plans. Think about it. At any given time, the Earth has the Doctor, Sarah Jane Smith, the Paternoster Gang, Torchwood, and or Unit. Even if one of those parties goes down, like if one gets its funding pulled because of Brexit, or if another gets bizarrely sent off to America due to a deal with stars. Very clever there.
That is. That's great.
I love that. Another one arrives to pick up the slack. Do hostile aliens not do their research, or are they not just not the sharpest tools in the shed? I'm kind of leaning toward the latter.
Yeah.
Really. That's why the Doctor gets out with them, because they're not as bright as he is. As always, love your podcast, and I look forward to future discussions. Best regards, Hannah. P.S. Thanks for pronouncing my name correctly in the Let's Kill Hitler review. Not very many people are able to figure it out. So, cheers for that, Hannah. I finally got one right. Yay! Because usually I butcher people's names. So, so I'm glad I got that one right. All right, and thank you for writing in. Always great to hear from you. Also, this time we got Holly Mack wrote in once again. Holly from Wisconsin, where she writes in, "Hey Charles and John," and this is regarding The Mind of Evil. "Forgot how much I enjoyed the story when I first watched it a few years ago. A Master and Third Doctor story with unit involved. This is going to be a good story with some twists and turns along the way. The reveal almost halfway through the episode that the machine/monster feeds on evil that's in someone's mind kind of surprised me that it didn't go after the Master right away." I know, right? Mm-hmm. That should be like a Lunchable for the Keller machine. Like
Thanksgiving dinner,
or like Lay's potato chips. You can't eat just one,
right?
You have to eat the whole bag. Let's see here. So now I'm hungry. And that didn't last too long. Powerful monster isn't going to let itself be controlled by you, Master. Looks like the Master bit off a little more than he could chew with Mailer and the missile. The ending with the Doctor breaking out the Venusian Aikido and the Master getting away and gloating about it is pure Third Doctor era, and the look that the Brig gives the Doctor at the end is priceless. Mm-hmm. Almost as if he wouldn't have it any other way, even if the Doctor can be a bit of a cranky pants at the time. I'll wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin. Thank you as always, Holly. Always great to hear from you, and glad you enjoyed this one, because this is a fun one. I really like this one, and obviously John likes it too. So, All right. So if you want to be like Hannah and Holly, please write to us. You can write to us at nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. Don't forget the SMG. It stands for Southgate Media Group. nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. Or you can reach us on Twitter at nextstopsmg on Twitter. Or Facebook, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. That would be great. You please like us and follow us there. Or you can check us out on the Insta at Next Stop Everywhere podcast on Instagram. That would be great. And John, where can they reach you?
Well, you've given out the my personal Facebook page. I've gotten a couple friend requests from some new Doctor Who fans.
Oh, that's good.
Because of it, so that's always great.
Yeah.
But we also have the Ohio Type 40, which we've talked about in the past also.
Right.
Right now, I've been really pushing the Fathom events end of time screening that they're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm going to try to go to that one.
Yeah, even though it's not the greatest story in the world, It's always fun to get a bunch of Doctor Who fans together and get them in one place to watch something like that on the big screen.
Yeah, I'm hoping to check that out here at the Lenox Theater in Columbus.
Yeah, I even posted on the page. I've already got my ticket. I'm sitting in seat E11 over at Valley View.
Nice.
So if anyone wants to, they just come on over and
come out and hang out with John.
Exactly.
Watch some Doctor Who. What's wrong with that?
That's it.
That's a great way to spend an evening.
It is.
All right, and hang out with your fellow Doctor Who fans.
That's right.
Yep. So please do that, because that'll be a lot of fun. Everyone else, as for me, of course, Charles Skaggs on Twitter. At Charles Skaggs on the Instagram as well. Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. And my blog of geeky things. Wait for the sound effect.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere, including Doctor Who, Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, all kinds of comic book sci-fi info that comes along the pike. Getting ready to write up my Spider-Man Far From Home review. I just saw that movie today. So hopefully I'll get that posted during this holiday weekend. and news of my other podcasts that I do for Southgate Media, including Titan Talk, the Titans podcast that I do with Jesse Jackson, where we just finished the season 1 of Doom Patrol on DC Universe, and we're gearing up. We're going to be kind of taking a little hiatus, but Titans season 2 should be starting up in October, and going to try to get one little episode to kind of bridge the gap a little bit, because the second half of Young Justice Outsiders, if you're a fan of that on DC Universe, I'm going to bring in Phil Parrish back, and we're going to finish up the second half of that season. Also, the Fandom Zone podcast that Jesse and I are now doing while Titan Talk is on hiatus. Jesse has been kind enough to take over as co-host for Karen, who's sadly had some health problems and hasn't been able to record lately. But these days we're reviewing Krypton from the Sci-Fi Network, based on the Superman mythos, and a lot of fun with that show so far this season, because they brought in Lobo, and that's been a lot of fun. So if you're into Krypton at all, or Superman, you might want to check out the Fandom Zone podcast for the next, 7 more episodes, in addition to the 3 that we've already talked about, while we talk about Krypton Season 2. Also, Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast I do with Zan Sprouse, wife of comic artist Chris Sprouse, where we talk about all things Twin Peaks and David Lynch. And right now, hopefully, we're going to be recording our second part of our Blue Velvet review of the new Criterion Collection Blu-ray, which came out not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a fan of that movie, it's a great movie, great classic movie. And please check that out. Otherwise, we'll be talking Twin Peaks once again before you know it. All right. So, John, anything else before we sign off?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me here on Next Up Everywhere. I hope you had fun.
Oh, I had a great time.
And always great to talk to you. I had a lot of fun. I love the fact that you have so much information. And I get, like, everybody out there, like, that learns stuff, hopefully, as we talk about Doctor Who and Next Stop Everywhere, I get to learn stuff from John. So I'm always geeked out about that. So I love talking to John. He's welcome back anytime. And in the meantime, though, next time on Next Stop Everywhere, on our next episode, DJ Nick, who talked The Enemy of the World with us not too long ago, is making a quick return back to Next Stop Everywhere, because we're going to talk Revelation of the Daleks.
Oh, nice.
So we're doing one of the better stories from Colin Baker's run. Mm-hmm. It's been a while since we talked some Colin Baker and Sixth Doctor, and this is a pretty interesting one to talk about, I think. So we're going to talk about that in episode 148. So, DJ Nick, if you enjoyed him as we talked to Enemy of the World, come on back. He's great, a lot of fun to talk to. And we're talking more classic Doctor Who as we talk the Sixth Doctor era. We're going to jump ahead to the 80s. 80s Doctor Who, I'm always up for talking that. And once again, I'm going to put out my plea, like anybody that wants to talk Peter Davison, because it's been a long time since I talked a Fifth Doctor story. Drop me a line. And because, and then if you want to talk about the Fifth Doctor with me, because I'd love to talk about that. Otherwise, everybody, thank you so much for listening to our little podcast. We have a lot of fun here, and John, thanks again. Welcome back anytime you want. Just come up with some episodes. You know the deal by now. Just email me, and we'll hook you up.
Sounds good.
All right. So everybody, take care. Follow John on all the social media, including the Ohio Type 40. Check them out. And come on back for Revelation of the Daleks. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll see you next time right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Bye, everybody.
Take care.